The transport shuttle descended through the thick atmosphere of Kragos Prime, and every student inside felt their stomachs drop. Through the windows, they could see the planet's surface covered in dense purple forests and jagged mountain ranges. Steam rose from volcanic vents scattered across the landscape. This was a death world, certified Class 7 on the Galactic Danger Scale. Instructor Velthar stood at the front of the shuttle, his forearms crossed over his armored chest. He was a Corinthian, a species known throughout the galaxy for producing the finest warriors and survival experts. His silver scales gleamed under the shuttle's lights, and his 3 eyes scanned the nervous faces before him. "Listen carefully." Velthar's voice boomed through the cabin. "This is your final examination for advanced survival training. You will spend 1 night on this planet. Just 1 night. If you survive until dawn, you pass. If you trigger your emergency beacon, you fail. If you die, well, your families will receive a very nice memorial plaque." Several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. There were 20 of them in total, representing a dozen different species from across known space. Most had never set foot on anything more dangerous than a garden world. In the back row, 3 humans sat together. Doyen gazed out the window with calm interest, his dark eyes tracking the terrain below. Next to him, Hana was already reviewing the survival data on her tablet, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. Taman leaned back in his seat, looking completely relaxed, almost bored. "The predators on Kragos Prime are among the most efficient killers in this sector," Velthar continued. "Razorbacks, tunnel crawlers, sky hunters, and at least 40 other species that would happily make you their dinner. Your survival depends on 3 things: choosing the right location, building proper defenses, and staying alert. Most creatures hunt at night. You will not sleep. You will not let your guard down. You will treat every sound as a potential threat." Kix, an insectoid Vrellan student, raised one of his 6 limbs. "Instructor, what if we encounter a predator directly?" "Run," Velthar said flatly. "Use your stun weapons only as a last resort. Your goal is to avoid detection, not to fight. You are not warriors. You are survivors. Remember the difference." The shuttle touched down in a clearing surrounded by towering trees with black bark and silver leaves. The door hissed open, and immediately the students smelled the air of Kragos Prime. It was thick and humid, carrying scents of sulfur, rotting vegetation, and something else, something that triggered ancient prey instincts in most of the class. "You have 2 hours of daylight left," Velthar announced. "I suggest you use them wisely. Your emergency beacons are in your survival packs. The drones will monitor your progress. Try not to die in any particularly embarrassing ways. It reflects poorly on the academy." The students filed out of the shuttle, clutching their packs. Within minutes, they began splitting into groups, mostly along species lines. The Vrellan students immediately started looking for caves. The Saurian students headed for high ground. The Aquaron students searched for water sources away from obvious danger. Doyen, Hana, and Taman stood together, looking at the map displayed on Hana's tablet. The map showed the local area with various markers indicating known predator territories, dangerous terrain, and potential shelter locations. "Most of the class is heading to the eastern ridge," Hana observed. "They think height equals safety." "They are wrong," Doyen said quietly. "Sky hunters patrol ridges. The data shows most attacks happen in elevated areas." Taman stretched his arms over his head. "So where should we go?" Doyen pointed to a section of the map marked in red indicating extreme danger. "There." Hana looked at the marker and smiled slightly. "The Razorback nesting grounds?" "Everyone else will avoid it," Doyen explained. "Which means we will not have to compete for resources or space. And if we understand the predator's behavior, we can use their territory to our advantage." Nearby, Narmoth, a large reptilian Saurian student, overheard this conversation. His vertical pupils widened in shock. "You cannot be serious. That zone is marked as a kill zone. Nothing survives there." "Nothing tries to survive there," Taman corrected cheerfully. "That is why it is perfect." "You are insane," Narmoth hissed. "All humans are insane." Doyen shouldered his pack. "Perhaps, but we are also very good at not dying." The 3 humans set off toward the danger zone while their classmates watched in disbelief. Ilvris, an amphibious Aquaron student, spoke into his communicator. "Instructor Velthar, the humans are walking directly toward the Razorback territory. Should we stop them?" Through the communicator, they heard Velthar sigh. "Let them go. Humans have a different relationship with danger than most species. Either they know something we do not, or they will serve as an educational example of what not to do. The humans walked through the forest for nearly an hour. The trees grew thicker here, and the undergrowth was dense with strange plants that seemed to pulse with bioluminescence as the sun began to set. They heard sounds all around them, clicking, growling, and the rustle of things moving through the shadows. Taman walked in front, somehow completely at ease. Hana kept her scanner running, monitoring for movement. Doyen studied everything, his mind cataloging details that might become important later. They found the razorback nest just as darkness began to fall. It was located in a natural amphitheater of rock with several cave entrances visible. Around the largest cave, they could see the creatures themselves. Razorbacks were massive, easily the size of earth bears. They had 6 legs, each ending in curved claws. Their backs were covered in crystalline spines that glowed faintly in the dim light. Their heads were broad and powerful, with jaws that could crush stone. There were at least a dozen of them visible, with probably more inside the caves. "Beautiful," Taman whispered. Through their communicators, they heard panicked voices from their classmates and instructors, but they ignored them. Instead, the 3 humans settled down about 50 meters from the nearest razorback, which watched them with glowing yellow eyes but did not move. Doyen began unpacking their camp gear. Hana started a small fire using the portable igniter from their kit. Taman pulled out rations and began heating water for their dinner. Back at the monitoring station, Instructor Velthar stared at the drone feed in absolute silence. Around him, other instructors gathered to watch the impossible scene unfolding on their screens. "They are camping next to the nest," someone whispered. "The Razorbacks are just watching." "Them," another said. On the screen, they could see Taman laughing at something Doyen said. Hana was adding seasoning to their meal. The Razorbacks had returned to their normal activities, apparently deciding the humans were not a threat. As full darkness fell on Kragos Prime, the 3 humans sat by their fire, eating dinner and talking quietly, while the most dangerous predators on the planet ignored them completely. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear other students setting up defensive positions, activating energy barriers and preparing for a long, sleepless night of terror. The humans, meanwhile, began taking turns deciding who would take the first watch and who would sleep first. "I will take first watch," Doyen volunteered. "You 2 get some rest." Taman was asleep within 5 minutes, his gentle snoring barely audible over the crackling fire. In the monitoring station, Instructor Velthar finally found his voice. "Document everything," he ordered. "I need to understand how they are doing this." But deep down, he suspected that understanding humans might be the hardest lesson of all. The night on Kragos Prime was nothing like the alien students had expected. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the bioluminescent plants that dotted the landscape like eerie stars. Strange sounds echoed through the forests, howls and clicks and scraping noises that made their blood run cold. Kix and his group of Rellan students had found what they thought was a perfect cave. They had set up motion sensors at the entrance and huddled together in the back, their compound eyes reflecting the glow of their portable lights. But 2 hours after sunset, they heard scraping sounds coming from beneath them. "What is that?" one of the Vrellans chirped nervously. The ground began to shift. Kix realized with horror that they were not on solid rock. They were on top of a tunnel crawler nest. The creatures were digging up toward them, attracted by the vibrations of their movements. "Abandon the position," Kix shouted. "Move, move, move!" The Vrellan students scrambled out of the cave just as the floor collapsed, revealing dozens of pale, segmented creatures with too many legs and circular mouths full of grinding teeth. The students ran into the darkness, their carefully planned defensive position destroyed in minutes. Meanwhile, Narmith and his Saurian companions had climbed to a high ridge overlooking a valley. They felt safe up there, above the forest floor where most predators roamed. They had built a basic shelter among the rocks and were taking turns on watch. Then the sky hunters came. They appeared without warning, gliding silently through the darkness on membranous wings. They were drawn to the heat signatures of the Saurian students. The first one dove, its talons extended, aiming for the student on watch. Narmith managed to fire his stun weapon, hitting the creature and sending it tumbling away. But the blast attracted more of them. Within minutes, the ridge was swarming with sky hunters, their piercing cries filling the air. Fall back to the forest, Narmoth ordered, his military training taking over. We cannot defend this position. The Saurians abandoned their shelter and fled down the ridge, sliding and stumbling in the darkness, pursued by the flying predators. Ilvris and the other Aquaron students had sought refuge in what appeared to be a calm pool of water. They were amphibious, comfortable in aquatic environments, and had assumed the water would provide safety. They were catastrophically wrong. The pool was home to ambush predators that lurked in the murky depths. These creatures could sense electrical fields produced by living beings. When the Aquaron students entered the water, they might as well have been ringing a dinner bell. Ilvris barely escaped when something massive brushed against his leg in the darkness. He pulled himself onto the bank, his heart's pounding, and saw the water churning with shadowy forms. 2 of his companions had not made it out. He activated his emergency beacon, failing the exam but saving their lives. The rescue drone arrived within minutes, pulling the terrified students from the water. Back at the monitoring station, Instructor Velthar watched multiple screens showing the chaos unfolding across Kragos Prime. More than half the class had already broken formation and were fleeing their initial positions. Several had activated emergency beacons. Others were scattered and lost. Then he switched to the feed showing the humans. The scene was so calm it seemed to be from a different planet entirely. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. Doyen sat on a flat rock, slowly feeding small sticks into the fire to keep it alive. He looked relaxed, occasionally glancing at his scanner but showing no signs of stress. Nearby, Hana was stretched out in her sleeping bag, breathing deeply in genuine sleep. And Taman somehow was curled up on his side with his pack as a pillow, snoring peacefully. About 10 meters away, a massive razorback lay on the ground, its crystalline spines glowing faintly. It was one of the nest sentinels keeping watch over the territory. Occasionally it would lift its head and look directly at the humans, then settle back down. "This is impossible," one of the monitoring technicians said. "Those creatures should have attacked them by now." Velthar studied the screen carefully. "Look at their positioning. They are not in the nest itself. They are near enough to be within the territory boundary, but far enough not to be seen as a direct threat. The Razorbacks are territorial, yes, but they are not mindlessly aggressive. They only attack creatures that threaten their young or try to claim their space." "But how did the humans know that?" the technician asked. "They observed first," Velthar said slowly. "Instead of reacting from fear, they studied the creature's behavior. This is not luck. This is strategy." On screen, Doyen stood and stretched. He walked a few steps away from the camp and pulled something from his pack. It was a ration bar, standard academy food. He unwrapped it, broke it in half, and casually tossed one piece toward the perimeter of the Razorback territory. The sentinel's head snapped up, tracking the movement. It stood and approached the food cautiously. It sniffed the ration bar, then picked it up in its powerful jaws and carried it back to its position, where it settled down to examine this strange offering. "Did he just feed the predator?" Someone gasped. "No," Velthar said, his 3 eyes widening. "He just demonstrated that he understands their social structure. That was a gift, a sign of respect. He is telling the Razorbacks that he recognizes their territory and means no harm." The sentinel ate the ration bar, then resumed its watching position. If anything, it seemed even more relaxed than before. Doyen returned to the fire and gently shook Hana awake. "Your turn for watch," he said quietly. Hana sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Anything interesting happen?" "Made friends with the neighbors," Doyen said, nodding toward the Razorback. "They seem to appreciate snacks." Hana smiled and took his position by the fire. Doyen climbed into his sleeping bag and within minutes was breathing deeply in sleep. The monitoring station was silent. Other instructors had gathered now, drawn by reports of the humans' impossible behavior. They watched as Hana sat calmly by the fire, occasionally checking her scanner but mostly just existing peacefully in the middle of what should have been certain death. "I have trained soldiers for 30 years, Velthar said softly. "I have taught survival techniques to hundreds of species, but I have never seen anything like this." Across the planet, the alien students were having the worst night of their lives. They were exhausted, terrified, and scattered. Every sound made them jump. Every shadow seemed to hide a predator. They fired stun weapons at imagined threats. They burned through their emergency supplies. They made noise and light and movement, doing everything that attracted predators rather than avoiding them. The humans, by contrast, were having a peaceful camping trip. Around midnight, Taman took his turn on watch. He sat by the fire, humming softly to himself. At one point, he pulled out a small harmonica from his pack and played a gentle tune. The razorback sentinel lifted its head, listening to the strange sounds. After a moment, it seemed to relax even further. "Is he playing music for the predators?" a technician whispered. "Apparently," Velthar replied, his voice filled with something between awe and disbelief. Taman finished his song and set the harmonica aside. He looked directly at the drone camera hovering nearby and waved. Then he settled back to maintain his watch, completely at ease. As the long night wore on, the contrast between the humans and the other students became impossible to ignore. The galaxy's various species, with all their advanced technology and training, were being hunted and terrorized by Kragos Prime's ecosystem. The humans from the death world called Earth were sleeping peacefully in the territory of apex predators. By the time dawn approached, Instructor Velthar had already begun writing his report. The title was simple: Humanity, a Reconsideration of Death World Psychology. He suspected it would be the most important document he ever produced. Because watching those three humans survive the night by befriending the deadliest creatures on the planet had taught him something fundamental about why humans were different. They did not survive despite being from a death world. They survived because of it, and that changed everything. Dawn was only 3 hours away when everything went wrong. The storm appeared on the sensors with almost no warning. Weather prediction on Kragos Prime was difficult because of the planet's volatile atmosphere. But this was different. This was a massive electrical storm system, the kind that appeared maybe once every few years. It was moving fast directly toward the area where the students were scattered. In the monitoring station, alarms began to sound. Velthar moved quickly to the weather display, his three eyes scanning the data with growing concern. "How bad is it?" one of the technicians asked. "Very bad," Velthar said. "Wind speeds over 200 kilometers per hour. Lightning strikes every few seconds. This will flood the valleys and turn the forest into a death trap. We need to evacuate immediately." He activated the general communications channel. "All students, this is Instructor Velthar. A severe storm is approaching your position. Activate your emergency beacons now. This is not a failure condition. I repeat, activate your beacons immediately. Extraction shuttles are launching." Across Kragos Prime, exhausted and terrified students reached for their emergency beacons with relief. Finally, this nightmare would be over. They pressed the activation buttons, and the beacons began broadcasting their distress signals into the darkness. But then something unexpected happened. The storm hit the edge of the monitoring range, and the electromagnetic interference was far worse than predicted. Half the drone feeds went dark. Communications became broken and static-filled. The carefully coordinated extraction plan fell apart within minutes. "I am not receiving clear signals from the beacons," the communications officer reported. "The storm is scattering the transmissions. Launch the shuttles anyway," Velthar ordered. "Use the last known positions." But even as he gave the order, he knew they had another problem. The storm had arrived faster than predicted. The shuttles could not fly in those wind conditions. They would have to wait until the worst of it passed, which could take an hour, maybe 2. The students on the ground were on their own, and the emergency beacons, which were supposed to save them, had just become the worst possible thing they could have activated. Kix was hiding under an overhang of rock with 2 other Vrellan students when they heard the sounds. At first, it was just one creature, drawn by the electronic pulse of the beacon, then another, then dozens. Predators from every direction were converging on their position, attracted by the signal that was supposed to bring rescue. "Turn it off," Kix shouted. "Turn off the beacon!" But emergency beacons by design could not be turned off once activated. That safety feature had just become a death sentence. Narmith and his group were in even worse trouble. They were in open ground when the storm hit, lightning turning night into day every few seconds. They could see creatures approaching from all sides, moving with purpose toward the beacon signal. The Saurians formed a defensive circle, stun weapons ready, but they were exhausted and outnumbered. "We cannot hold this position," Narmoth said, his voice steady despite the fear. "When I give the signal, we run for the tree line. Stay together. Do not stop for anything." Ilvris had already been extracted. But 2 Aquaron students were still in the swamp area, their beacon drawing things up from the water that he did not want to think about. Their communicators were barely working, just fragments of desperate calls for help. At the human camp, Doyen was awakened by the first rumble of thunder. He sat up immediately, his survival instincts fully alert. Hana was already checking her scanner, and Taemin was packing their gear with quick, efficient movements. The Razorbacks around them were agitated, the adults moving their young deeper into the caves. The storm was making them nervous, but they showed no aggression toward the humans. In fact, the sentinel that had been watching them all night moved closer, as if including them in the protection of the territory. "Instructor Velthar is calling for emergency extraction," Hana said, listening to the broken communications. "But the shuttles cannot fly in this storm. Students are scattered. Beacons are active." Doyen's expression darkened. "Active beacons will attract every predator within range." "The signals are like dinner bells," Taemin added grimly. "Our classmates are in serious trouble. They listen to more broken transmissions, screams, weapons fire, desperate calls for help." The communication channel was chaos, filled with fear and confusion. Then they heard Kix's voice, barely audible through the static. "Anyone, please. We are surrounded. Cannot hold much longer." The 3 humans looked at each other. Around them they were safe. The storm was approaching, but the Razorback caves would provide shelter. The crystalline spines on the creatures' backs were actually conducting the lightning safely into the ground, creating a protective zone. They could wait out the storm in perfect safety while the shuttles prepared for extraction. "We should go get them," Taemin said quietly. Hana nodded. Yes, Doyen was already adjusting his pack. "We need to move fast. The storm will be at full strength soon." Through their communicator, Velthar's voice came through clearly for a moment. "Humans, if you can hear this, stay at your current position. That is an order. Do not move. The shuttles will extract you when the storm passes. Do not attempt to help the others. Do you understand? Stay where you are." Doyen switched off the communicator and stood. "Let us go." In the monitoring station, Velthar watched the human position through one of the few remaining drone feeds. He saw them gathering their gear, checking their equipment, preparing to leave. "No," he said softly. "No, do not do this. You are safe. Stay safe." But even as he said it, he knew they would not listen, because he was beginning to understand something about humans that no amount of academic study had prepared him for. They did not think like prey. They did not even think like predators. They thought like something else entirely, something the galaxy had never encountered before. They thought like a pack that did not abandon its members, no matter the cost. On the screen, the 3 humans left their safe position by the Razorback nest and headed directly into the storm. The sentinel Razorback watched them go, and for a moment, Velthar could have sworn the creature looked confused, as if wondering why these strange visitors would leave safety for danger. Doyen led the way, moving quickly but carefully through the forest as the first heavy raindrops began to fall. Hana was checking her scanner, trying to locate the nearest distress signals through the interference. Taemin carried extra medical supplies, his expression more serious than Velthar had ever seen it. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the forest in stark white light. In that instant, Velthar saw something else on the feeds. He saw the predators moving through the darkness, converging on the beacon signals. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The humans were walking directly into a killing ground, and they knew it. They were choosing to go anyway. "Get every available shuttle ready," Velthar ordered, his voice hard. "The moment this storm clears enough to fly, I want them in the air. We are going to need medical teams standing by." "For the students being rescued?" a technician asked. "For everyone," Velthar said, watching the humans disappear into the storm-torn darkness, including the 3 fools who think they can save 20 students from a planet that wants to kill them all. But even as he said the words, something in his warrior's heart stirred. Because fools did not plan, fools did not prepare, fools did not move with the confidence he saw in those 3 humans. They were not fools. They were something far more dangerous. They were humans who had decided that their classmates would not die tonight. And Velthar suspected that Kragos Prime was about to learn why death worlds produced the most terrifying survivors in the galaxy. The storm hit with full force as the humans moved through the forest. Rain fell in sheets so heavy that visibility dropped to almost nothing. Lightning struck constantly. turning the world into a strobing nightmare of light and shadow. Wind tore at the trees, sending branches crashing down around them. Doyen led the way, moving with a certainty that seemed impossible in the conditions. He was not just running blindly. He was thinking, calculating, using the terrain and his knowledge of predator behavior to find the safest routes through the chaos. Kix's group is closest, Hana shouted over the wind, reading her scanner. 2 kilometers northeast, but the signal is weak. Then we go fast, Doyen replied. They ran through the darkness, and that was when the predators found them. The first pack came from the left, attracted by their movement and heat signatures. They were nocturnal stalkers built low to the ground with too many legs and eyes that reflected the lightning. There were at least a dozen of them moving to surround the humans. In the monitoring station, the few technicians who still had drone feeds watched with horror. This was it. The humans were about to be torn apart, but Taman did not raise his stun weapon. Instead, he did something that no one expected. He charged directly at the pack's leader, screaming at the top of his lungs. The sound that came from Taman was primal, a roar of challenge that carried even over the storm. He was not running from the predators. He was attacking them. The lead stalker hesitated, confused. This was not how Prey behaved. Prey ran, Prey cowered. Prey did not charge while making aggressive territorial sounds. Doyen and Hana joined in, all 3 humans advancing on the pack with aggressive postures, making themselves look bigger, louder, more dangerous than they actually were. The predators broke. They scattered back into the forest, their instincts telling them that something was very wrong with this prey. The cost of attacking was suddenly too high. Easier prey existed elsewhere. That should not have worked, Velthar whispered, staring at the screen. But it did, one of the technicians said. How did they know it would work? Because on their world, Velthar said slowly, this is how you survive. You do not show fear. You become the scarier thing. The humans kept moving. They found Kix's group trapped under their rock overhang, surrounded by at least 20 different predators drawn by the beacon signal. The Vrellan students were firing their stun weapons, but they were exhausted and running low on charges. Doyun assessed the situation in seconds. We need to draw the predators away. Hana, can you override their beacon signal? Not override, but I can boost ours to be stronger, Hana said, already working on her equipment. If we broadcast a louder signal, some of the predators might follow us instead. Do it, Doyen ordered. Hana modified their own emergency beacon, then activated it at maximum power. The signal blazed across the electromagnetic spectrum, and immediately several of the predators turned toward the humans. Now we run, Taman said, and they follow us. They sprinted away from Kix's position, leading a pack of confused and angry predators through the storm. But they were not just running blindly. Doyen was guiding them toward a specific area, a rocky slope he had noticed on the maps. When they reached it, he turned and faced the pursuing predators. Now we fight. The predators charged up the slope, and the humans met them with stun weapons and improvised weapons made from broken branches. But more importantly, they used the terrain. They channeled the predators into narrow gaps between rocks. They used height advantage. They worked together with a coordination that spoke of thousands of years of pack hunting evolution. It was not a fair fight. It did not need to be. The humans were not trying to kill the predators. They were just making themselves too expensive to hunt. After several of the creatures were stunned and sent tumbling down the slope, the rest withdrew. The beacon was not worth this much trouble. They went to find easier meals elsewhere. Kix, can you hear me? Doyen called into his communicator. The way should be clear now. Move to high ground and find shelter from the storm. We are coming back for you. You saved us, Kix's voice came back, filled with disbelief. You left safety to save us. We are a team, Hana said simply. Now move before more predators arrive. They found Narmuth's group next, surrounded in a clearing with nowhere to run. The Saurian students were holding formation, but they were seconds away from being overrun. This time, Taman used a different strategy. He pulled out the emergency flares from his pack and ignited all of them at once, creating a wall of bright chemical fire between the students and the predators. The sudden light and heat confused the creatures long enough for the humans to reach the Saurian students. Follow us, Doyen shouted. We know a safe route. Why should we trust you? Narmuth gasped, exhausted. Because we are still alive, Hana replied. And you are not going to survive without us. Your choice. Make it fast. Narmoth looked at his group, then at the predators beginning to circle around the flares. We follow the humans. They moved as a larger group now, the humans leading the alien students through the storm with a confidence that bordered on supernatural. Every time predators approached, the humans either scared them off or fought just enough to make the cost too high. Finding the Aquaron students in the swamp was harder. The water was rising fast and the creatures below were getting bolder. Taman simply jumped into the water without hesitation, diving down to reach the struggling students. He is going to die, someone in the monitoring station said. But Taman surfaced moments later, dragging an Aquaron student with him. He pulled them to the bank, then dove again. And again, each time coming up with another student moving faster than should have been possible. Humans evolved as pursuit hunters, Velthar said, watching in awe. They can run for days. Their endurance is legendary, but I did not know they could swim like that too. Earth is mostly water, Hana explained to the rescued students as she checked them for injuries. We learned to swim before we learned to walk as a species. By the time the storm began to ease, the humans had gathered 12 students in a defensible position. They were exhausted, covered in mud and blood, but none of them had been seriously injured. More importantly, they had saved students from 6 different species who should have been dead. As dawn broke, the rescue shuttles finally launched. Through the clearing clouds, the students saw the lights approaching. Doyen sat down heavily, his energy finally flagging. Taman was already half asleep, leaning against a rock. Hana was doing a final count to make sure everyone was accounted for. The monitoring station had gone completely silent. Every instructor, every technician was watching the feeds of the 3 humans and the students they had saved. They crossed 5 kilometers of storm-torn death world. Velthar said softly. They fought off dozens of predators. They rescued 12 students from 6 species, and they did it with basic equipment and training. How? Someone asked. Velthar looked at the screens, at the 3 humans who were now sitting quietly as the shuttles approached. They did not look like heroes. They looked like tired students who had just finished a difficult exam. Because they are from Earth, Velthar said, and on Earth everything wants to kill you. So you learn to be unkillable. You learn to run farther, fight harder, and never abandon your pack. That is what death worlds create. That is what humans are. The first shuttle landed and medical teams rushed out. But the humans waved them toward the alien students first. We are fine, Doyen said. Check them first. As the rescued students were loaded onto the shuttles, each of them looked back at the 3 humans with expressions of wonder and gratitude. And across the galaxy, in monitoring stations and military academies and government offices, people watched the recordings of what would become known as the human run, and began to understand something new about the species from the death world called Earth. They were not just survivors. They were the definition of what survival meant. The debriefing room at the Galactic Academy was completely silent. All 20 students sat in their assigned seats, along with a dozen instructors and several academy officials who had traveled from across the sector to hear the testimony about what happened on Kragos Prime. Instructor Velthar stood at the front of the room, his 3 eyes scanning the assembled students. Many of them showed signs of their ordeal. Bandages, bruises, exhaustion visible in their postures. But they were all alive. We will hear from each student group, Velthar announced, starting with the Vrellan contingent. Kix, please describe your experience. Kix stood, his 6 limbs still trembling slightly. We were surrounded. Our beacon had drawn more predators than we could count. We had maybe 5 minutes of stun weapon charges remaining. I was preparing to send final messages to my family. He paused, his compound eyes reflecting the room's lights. Then the humans came. They drew the predators away from us using their own beacon as bait. They fought creatures that should have killed them, and they won. Without the humans, my entire group would be dead. A murmur went through the room. One of the academy officials, a dignified Valoran administrator, leaned forward. You are saying that 3 students saved your entire group? Students with the same equipment and training as you? Yes, Kix said firmly. But they were not the same. They thought differently. They moved differently. They did not fight like they were afraid to die. They fought like dying was not even a consideration. Narmoth stood next. My group was in a similar situation. We were exhausted from fighting off sky hunters scattered by the storm and surrounded when our beacon activated. The humans found us in the darkness. He paused, his reptilian features showing an expression that might have been awe. I am from a warrior culture. My species has produced soldiers for 10,000 years. But I have never seen anything like what those humans did. They charged into danger that would make trained warriors hesitate, and they did it to save students they barely knew. One by one, the rescued students testified. Each told similar stories. The humans arriving in impossible situations. The humans fighting with a ferocity and intelligence that seemed beyond their training. The humans refusing to leave anyone behind. Ilvris, the Aquaron student, spoke last. Taman jumped into water filled with predators to pull us out. He dove 6 times into water that held creatures that could have torn him apart. He did not hesitate. He did not calculate the risks. He just did what needed to be done. Ilvris's voice became thick with emotion. I asked him later why he did it. He looked confused by the question. He said, "You needed help." What else would I do? The room was silent for a long moment. Then Veltar turned to the 3 humans who sat together in the back row. Doyen, Hana, Taman, please come forward. The 3 humans stood and walked to the front of the room. They did not look particularly impressive. They were young, relatively small compared to many of the species present, and they showed signs of exhaustion and minor injuries from their ordeal. Explain, Veltar said simply. Explain how you did what you did. Explain how you survived by sleeping next to apex predators. Explain how you crossed 5 kilometers of storm-torn Death World to rescue 12 students. Explain how you fought off dozens of predators with basic equipment. The entire galaxy wants to understand. Doyen spoke first, his voice calm and measured. We did not fight the planet. We understood it. Kregos Prime is dangerous, yes, but it is not randomly dangerous. The predators have behaviors and patterns. The Razorbacks are territorial but not aggressive unless threatened. We respected their space and they left us alone. It is not complicated. But you left that safety, Veltar pressed. You were in the safest position on the entire planet. You could have waited for extraction in perfect comfort. Why did you leave? The 3 humans looked at each other as if the question made no sense. Because people needed help, Hana said, as if this explained everything. You could have died, Veltar said. All 3 of you could have died trying to save students who made poor choices about their defensive positions. But we did not die, Taman said with a slight smile. And neither did they. That is what matters. An Academy official stood, his voice sharp with frustration. This is not a joke. You violated direct orders. You took absurd risks. You behaved in a manner completely contrary to all survival training doctrine, and yet you succeeded. We need to understand the logic behind your decisions. Doyen looked at the official for a long moment. There is a saying on Earth, you do not leave people behind. This is not complicated logic. This is basic morality. Our classmates were in danger. We could help them. So we did. Even at risk to yourselves? The official demanded. Especially at risk to ourselves, Hana said quietly. What value is survival if you abandon your principles to achieve it? What value is safety if you must step over your friends to reach it? The room erupted in discussion. Some officials argued that the humans had been reckless. Others pointed out that their recklessness had saved 12 lives. Some said the humans should be disciplined for violating orders. Others said they should be commended for their bravery. Veltar raised one of his 4 hands for silence. I have prepared a report on what happened on Kregos Prime. I have studied the recordings from every drone, analyzed every decision the humans made, and consulted with xenopsychologists and evolutionary biologists. I want to share my conclusions. He activated the large display behind him, showing images of Earth. Oceans, forests, deserts, mountains, and everywhere predators. Sharks, wolves, bears, snakes, insects, bacteria. Thousands of species that could kill humans. Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world, Veltar began. This is the highest danger classification we have. By comparison, Kregos Prime is only Class 7. Earth is more dangerous than the planet we used for survival training. Shocked, murmurs went through the room. Humans evolved in an environment where everything was trying to kill them, Veltar continued. They had no venom, no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. They were slow compared to predators. They were weak compared to prey. By all logic, they should have gone extinct. But they did not, Veltar said, his voice growing stronger. Instead, they became persistence hunters. They learned to track prey for days, running until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. They learned to work in groups, communicating and coordinating in ways that multiplied their effectiveness. They learned to use tools to plan, to think multiple steps ahead. And most importantly, they learned that the pack survives when every member of the pack is willing to risk themselves for the others. The display changed to show recordings from Kragos Prime, the humans sleeping by the razorback nest, the humans charging into the storm, the humans fighting predators to save their classmates. "This is not recklessness," Velthar said. "This is Deathworld evolution. Humans do not see danger the way we do. They see problems to be solved. They do not see impossible situations. They see challenges to be overcome. And they do not see expendable pack members. They see family worth dying for." He turned to look at the three humans. "You asked them to explain their logic. But their logic is not something that can be taught in a classroom. It is written into their genetics by millions of years of surviving on a planet that wanted them dead. They cooperate because isolated humans die. They take risks because cautious humans starve. They never abandon their pack because abandoned pack members do not pass on their genes." The room was completely silent now. "The question we must ask ourselves," Velthar said, "is not why the humans did what they did. The question is what it means for the galaxy that we now have a species among us that evolved this way." He looked around the room at all the assembled officials and instructors. "Because I will tell you what it means. It means that if you serve alongside humans, they will never abandon you. It means that if you are in danger and humans can reach you, they will come regardless of the cost to themselves. It means that we have found allies who define loyalty not as a choice but as an instinct." Velthar turned back to the three humans. "You passed your survival exam, obviously. But more than that, you have taught us something far more valuable than any survival technique. You have shown us what it truly means to be a pack species from a death world." He raised one hand in the formal salute of respect. Around the room slowly. Other instructors and officials did the same. Then the students, even the ones the humans had not rescued, stood and saluted. The three humans looked uncomfortable with the attention, but they returned the salute. Later, in the academy cafeteria, the story was already spreading. Students from across the campus came to see the three humans who had done the impossible. Some wanted autographs. Some wanted to know if the stories were true. Some just wanted to say thank you. Doyun, Hana, and Taemin sat together at their usual table, eating their lunch and trying to ignore the attention. "This is weird," Taemin said. "We just did what anyone would do." "Not anyone," Kik said, approaching their table with several other rescued students. "Not anyone at all. What you did was extraordinary. We owe you our lives." "You do not owe us anything," Hana said. "We are classmates. That is what classmates do." Across the galactic network, humanity's reputation changed. They were no longer seen as tea,